The grand hall of the Celestial Academy gleamed with bioluminescent crystals, casting ethereal shadows across species from 14 different star systems. David Chen stood near the observation deck, his worn Earth-standard uniform a stark contrast to the flowing silks and adaptive armor worn by his classmates. At 17, he was the youngest human ever admitted to the prestigious institution, a fact that seemed to amuse, rather than impress, most of the galaxy's elite youth. Princess Zithara of the Krill Empire glided across the polished floor, her forearms gesturing elegantly as her entourage followed. The Krill were conquerors, their empire spanning 300 systems. Zithara's scales shimmered with the iridescent purple that denoted royalty, and her vertical pupils fixed on David with predatory curiosity. "The human specimen," she announced, her voice carrying the harmonics that made Krillion's speech sound like music. "Tell me, little primate, how does it feel to study among your betters?" The hall fell silent. Several students turned to watch, their various sensory organs focused on the confrontation. David's roommate, a hulking Torvian named Grex, tensed nearby, his mandibles clicking nervously. David met Zithara's gaze steadily, but said nothing. No response. Zithara's laugh was like wind chimes, beautiful and cold. "Perhaps you lack the cognitive capacity for witty repartee. I forget your species only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. My people mastered it before your ancestors discovered fire." Her entourage joined in the laughter. A Vespid noble buzzed her wings in amusement. Even some of the faculty observers seemed entertained by the exchange. David remained silent, his dark eyes calm. Penelope Voss, the only other human at the academy, pushed through the crowd. Her red hair seemed to flame under the crystal light. "Leave him alone, Zithara. He hasn't done anything to you." The other human rushes to defend her primitive kinsman. Zithara's tone dripped with condescension. "How touching. Tell me, Penelope, does your species always require such collective support, or is your friend simply too simple to speak for himself?" Penelope's fists clenched, but David placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He shook his head slightly, a human gesture Zithara wouldn't understand. "Fascinating." The princess continued, circling David like a predator, silent as stone. "Perhaps this is some sort of meditation technique. Or maybe," she leaned closer, her breath smelling of ozone and spices, "you simply recognize your place in the natural order. Humans are newcomers, barely worth the designation sentient, your pets at best, curiosities to be studied." And the Academy's emergency klaxons shattered the moment. "Breach in Sector 7, the Academy's AI announced. Unknown hostile entities. All students evacuate to designated safe zones." Chaos erupted. The Vespid took flight immediately, their wings creating a dangerous downdraft. Krill guards materialized around Zithara, forming a protective barrier with their bodies. Students scattered in panic as the deck shuddered beneath them. Through the observation window, David saw them, Void Reapers, the galaxy's most feared predators. They existed in the spaces between dimensions, creatures of pure malevolence that occasionally broke through into normal space. Their forms shifted constantly, defying geometry and sanity. 3 of them had materialized inside the Academy itself. The Krill guards activated their plasma weapons, but the Reapers moved like thought itself. 2 guards fell, their screams cut short as they were pulled into dimensional rifts. Zithara stumbled backward, her composure finally cracking. David moved, while others fled. He ran toward the armory terminal. His fingers flew across the holographic interface with practiced precision. Penelope realized what he was doing and followed, providing override codes she'd memorized during their orientation. "David, what are you?" He pulled two phase rifles from the rack and tossed one to her, then grabbed a belt of graviton grenades. His face remained calm, focused. "You can't fight those things." Zithara shrieked as her remaining guards hustled her toward the evacuation pods. "They're immortal." A Reaper phased through the wall behind her. Its form was wrong, all angles that shouldn't exist and colors that had no name. The princess froze, her forearms trembling. David didn't hesitate. He fired the phase rifle, the beam calibrated to multi-dimensional frequencies. The Reaper recoiled, its form destabilizing. It wasn't hurt, but it was surprised something had touched it. "Penelope, Pattern 7. David shouted his first words since entering the hall. They moved like they'd trained together for years, though they'd only met weeks ago. Penelope laid down suppressing fire while David armed a graviton grenade and threw it with the precision of Earth's gravity-born instincts. The grenade detonated, creating a localized singularity that pulled the Reaper toward it. For 3 seconds, the creature was anchored to normal space. David fired again, this time aiming for what his intuition told him was a vulnerable point. The Reaper shrieked a sound that made crystalline walls crack and collapsed into itself, banishing back to its home dimension. That 2 more Reapers remained. The Academy's security forces were pinned down in the western corridor. David and Penelope were the only ones engaging the creatures in this sector. They fought in silence, communicating through glances and small gestures. David's movements were efficient, economical, born from a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and countless wars. He didn't waste motion or energy. Every shot counted. Every decision was instant and correct. Penelope covered his flanks, her own combat instincts inherited from generations of survivors making her a perfect complement to his tactics. Within minutes, the remaining Reapers were driven back through the dimensional tiers, which sealed behind them. The klaxons fell silent. Emergency lighting flickered to standard illumination. David lowered his rifle and checked on the wounded. Several students had been injured in the panic, but no more deaths. He moved among them, applying basic first aid with steady hands. Zithara stood against the wall, her scales pale with shock. She watched as David helped a Torvian student whose leg had been broken in the stampede. The princess's expression was unreadable. When galactic security forces finally arrived, they found David sitting quietly on a bench, the phase rifle disassembled and cleaned beside him. Penelope sat next to him, exhausted but unharmed. "Why didn't you say anything?" Zithara approached slowly, her entourage gone. "Before, when I mocked you, you could have told me about Earth's military history, about your species' combat capabilities. You could have defended yourself." David looked up at her. His eyes held no anger, no triumph, just quiet understanding. "Words," he finally said, his voice soft, "are for those who need to prove something. I didn't." He stood and walked toward the medical bay to check on the more seriously wounded, leaving Zithara standing in the hall, her reflection shimmering in the polished Flora princess who'd learned that silence could speak louder than any boast, and that humanity's strength had never been in their ability to brag, but in their capacity to simply do what needed to be done. Penelope followed David, a slight smile on her face. Behind them, the princess of the Krill Empire bowed a gesture she'd never given anyone outside her own species before.